Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome Fort Albany First Nation. My name is Don Parkinson, and I'm a Senior Consultation Specialist with Atkins Realis. Today, we are continuing our series of Webquay Supply Road virtual community meetings with specific communities as our project moves through consultation round 3 of the environmental assessment phase. Today, we will be doing a review of where we are in the project to date and provide samples of the preliminary results of some of the topics studied, also known as valued components. This will be the first of two parts of this presentation that we will be presenting to communities. Well, actually, the second of two parts, and part two is covering additional valued components. The purpose of these virtual community meetings is to provide you and your community with an update on our project and receive input on the project as we walk through the environmental assessment process. While this meeting is virtual, our team is available anytime to meet your community either in person or in whatever format best suits your community. At the same time, we will respect your community consultation protocols. I do want to note that we've shortened the presentation to cover a couple of valued components due to time limits, but the full presentation will be available on our project website, supplyroad.ca. So let's get started now with a few words from Chief Wabas of Webequie First Nation, talking about the importance of the project to his community.
Webequie has a vision, for their community, and and we're looking for ways to how to prosper our community, and also to find or address some of the challenges that we have in our community. So we look into economic development, and we look into what's out there that can help us, become a community a vibrant community that is prospering from using the lands and resources. And one of the things that we're doing is that we're looking at some potential economic development opportunities, including, developing a road to potential sites in mineral development. So we are, exploring opportunities for our community, and also looking at our future generation as well too. We like to see be able to have opportunities for our future generation, so they can live a good life and a healthy life, and hopefully with the opportunities that we're looking at, it will generate job opportunities and also bring in a good infrastructure for our community.
Our thanks to Chief Wabas for his thoughtful comments on the importance of the Webequie Supply Road project to his First Nation. Let's move now to the presentation, part two of the preliminary results of the valued components, or VCs, and then we're going to come back and take any questions or comments community members may have. So with that, let's play the consultation round 3, part 2 video. Welcome to round 3 of the WSR environmental assessment phase. Recently, we covered part 1 of the presentation, which talked about what is being looked at in the provincial environmental and federal impact assessments, how the effects assessment is being completed, and the preliminary effects assessment results for select valued components, which are basically the different things we have studied as part of the environmental assessment and impact assessment. Today, we will be covering part 2, in which we continue to go over the preliminary results of effects assessment for select valued components, and we'll also cover cumulative effects, which are the leftover effects of this project combined with others from the past, present, and future. Webequie First Nation is about 200 to 250 kilometers from the Hudson Bay and James Bay coasts, and the planned Webequie Supply Road runs south of Webequie and then east to the Ring of Fire area. The purpose of the Webequie Supply Road is to move people and supplies to the Ring of Fire area, create jobs and business opportunities for community members, as well as skills training opportunities for young people. As this is Webequie's project, this would be done in a careful, sensitive way that will preserve and strengthen the community's language and culture. The planned road will be 107 kilometers long, with 17 kilometers on the Webequie First Nation reserve lands. The corridor planning area is 2 kilometers wide, but the actual cleared area will be 35 meters wide. Make 3 large water crossings and will include temporary pits and quarries, equipment storage areas, and construction camps. The road will make 6 major water crossings and will include temporary pits and quarries, equipment storage areas, and 4 construction camps. Now let's talk about the communication we have had with Indigenous communities. In our consultation rounds 1 and 2, and part 1 of round 3 of consultation with communities, the project website was updated with new information. Notices were sent to all 22 communities, offering a variety of engagement options, and in-person and virtual community sessions were conducted, as well as streaming sessions to help community members better understand the process and the project overall. As mentioned, the WSR consultation team offered opportunities for all 22 Indigenous communities to provide input on the project during round 3, part 1, as we previously did during round 1 and round 2. The virtual community sessions with each of the 22 communities are heavily promoted through social media and email. A variety of input was received on the project during round 2, ranging from ownership and responsibility for the completed road, impacts of climate change, employment and training opportunities, business opportunities, and impacts on treaty rights to potential downstream impacts to coastal communities. Much of the feedback related to topics that will be addressed as the project moves closer to construction, or those that are of a more regional nature and have their own process, such as federal regional assessment. Let's move now to the heart of the presentation. In part 1 of round 3, we described what is an EA or IA and what is being assessed in the EA or IA. As a refresher, environmental assessments are studies which assess the potential environmental effects, good or bad, of an individual proposal or project. For our purposes, the term environmental assessment or EA refers to the provincial process, while impact assessment or IA refers to the federal process. It includes engagement with rights holders and stakeholders to inform the process. As we have mentioned before, valued components or VCs are what has been identified by community members, the general public, and technical experts as required for study in the environmental assessment or impact assessment. In part 1, we looked at the project's effect on some select valued components. Today, in part 2, we are looking at the project's effect on some other select VCs and other effects such as accidents or spills. Before we go further, let's review some key terms. Valued components, or VCs, are what are to be studied in the EA and IA. Indicators are the ways to measure potential effects for VCs. Temporal boundaries is the timeline for assessment, and spatial boundaries are the geographic areas for assessment. Now we are going to talk about how the effects assessment is done. Engagement and consultation, as well as Indigenous knowledge, land and resource use, feeds into the effects assessment steps, including identifying what will be studied, defining boundaries, identifying possible effects and which are left over after mitigation, then looking at all the effects together, then identifying follow-up and monitoring and overall advantages and disadvantages of the project. We have received a lot of IKLRU information so far, including the purpose of traditional ceremonies, reliance on country foods, and climate change impacts. Existing or baseline conditions for each of the VCs are described through background research, engagement and consultation, and field studies. For each VC, we look at potential effects and pathways, how it happens, the route followed. For example, grading or reshaping the land as part of the project usually hardens the ground, making it harder for rain to get into the soil and lowering groundwater levels. Mitigation can be done in different ways. Elimination of effects, reduction and control of effects and offsets, where improvements can be made elsewhere to improve fish habitat, for example. When we describe the net or leftover effects, we talk about the direction of the changes, positive or negative, the amount of change, the area impacted by the effect, when the effect will occur, how long the effect will be, how often it will occur, the social or cultural effect, whether the effect will be permanent, and how likely the effect is to occur. We determine how significant net or leftover effects using a number of methods, such as scientific experts working with community members, assessing risk ranking, or weighing effects, as well as the professional judgment of experts using their knowledge and experience. Let's move now to talk about preliminary results of effects assessment for select valued components. While we will focus on vegetation, which includes peatlands, wildlife, Aboriginal and treaty rights and interests for this presentation, due to limited time, the full version of this presentation that is available on the website will include preliminary results for social and economic, cultural heritage and archaeology, and human health and country foods. Possible impacts on vegetation could include changes in the variety or number of vegetation species through removal of some vegetation species that are rare or are important to community members and introduction of other species not from the area. We plan to mark and protect sensitive areas, including rare vegetation communities, as well as use lower impact vegetation clearing equipment. No herbicides or chemicals will be used to remove vegetation will be used. Also, specific management plans for soils, vegetation, erosion and sediment control, fuel storage and handling, spills prevention, construction waste, and site restoration and monitoring will be put in place to mitigate, meaning reduce or eliminate, potential project impacts. As for wildlife, the project could possibly result in wildlife loss due to project activities such as vegetation clearing and culvert installation. Changes in the movement of wildlife could also occur due to vegetation clearing, temporary use of fencing, and disturbances from blasting, clearing, hauling, and grading during construction and use of the road during its operation, as well as possible impacts from vehicle collisions. To mitigate or control possible impacts, our team will identify key wildlife habitat, avoid areas frequently used, time construction activities to limit impacts, help restore habitat and population of species at risk, put wildlife and vegetation management plans into action, and restore temporarily disturbed areas immediately after construction. In terms of the social environment, the project could possibly result in population changes, meaning actual numbers of people and a mix of people, increased demand for housing and community services, increased load on community infrastructure, and possible changes to well-being. Positive effects could include fewer people leaving the community due to more economic opportunities available in community and improvements in the overall education and skill level of community members. To limit possible impacts on the social environment, cultural awareness training will be conducted for outside workers. Temporary construction camps will be used, training programs will be provided, improvements to healthcare facilities and services will be made, the number of outside workers will be limited, and air transportation will be used to limit impacts on community infrastructure. In terms of potential impacts on community members and the ability to exercise Aboriginal and treaty rights, the project could potentially impact access to lands and resources for traditional activities, change plants and animals, change harvesting areas, as well as impact the quality and type as well as availability of culturally important areas. To limit the impacts on community members and the exercise of their Aboriginal and treaty rights, we plan to continue to consult with community members to identify how to minimize or avoid impacts, avoid key traditional use areas, restore disturbed areas as quickly as possible, and use Indigenous knowledge, land and resources use information in not only the EA and IA, but also project development, planning, and design. Cumulative effects are the net effects of the project, combined with the net effects of other past, present, and future projects. It recognizes that the project does not sit alone in terms of impacts. There are a number of past, present, and future physical activities or projects in the general project region that are being considered in the cumulative effects assessment. Fish and fish habitat. The leftover effects of the proposed project on fish and fish habitat are expected to be low in magnitude with the implementation of mitigation measures to reduce or eliminate impacts. When it comes to Aboriginal and treaty rights and interests, potential cumulative effects of the proposed WSR and other activities or projects that could overlap with the WSR are anticipated to have predictable and mitigatable effects on local Indigenous communities. Traditional land and resource use patterns may be changed due to increased access. Changes to community life and traditional lifestyles or cultural continuity are not expected to change that much with the all-season road, given the implementation of mitigation measures. In terms of other possible effects, these could be what are called accidents or malfunctions, and could include accidental spills of hazardous materials, such as gasoline, diesel, propane, hydraulic fluids, lubricating oils and greases, and explosives, fires and explosions, damage or failure of road and or structure crossings of water bodies, vehicle or equipment accidents, accidental collisions involving vehicles associated with the project and vehicles moving through or around construction sites, or accidental death of animals due to inappropriate machinery or equipment operation. Accidental movements into environmentally sensitive habitat and sites such as watercourses or areas of cultural importance. Possible environmental effects of the project could include extreme weather events, wildfires, and changing climate. We designed the project to consider things like environmental risks and the changing climate. We also follow all design requirements for provincial highway projects. Our project emergency response plans take things like extreme weather events and wildfires into consideration. The project's EA or IA is required to include a description of the extent to which the effects of the project hinder or contribute to the Government of Canada's ability to meet its environmental obligations and its commitments in respect to climate change. The goals and objectives of the proposed Webequie Supply Road are as follows: to facilitate the movement of materials, supplies, and people from the Webequie Airport to the area of existing mineral exploration activities and proposed mine developments in the McFalls Lake area, to provide employment and other economic development opportunities to Webequie First Nation community members and businesses that reside in or around the community's reserve and traditional territory while preserving their language and culture, and to provide experience and training opportunities for youth to help encourage pursuit of additional skills through post-secondary education. As of now, the plan is to finalize the environmental assessment in 2026. You can contact us in many ways. Miigwech, and see you soon. Okay, welcome back, everyone. And why don't we open the floor now and see if we have any questions? So it looks like we don't have any questions or comments. So with that, that wraps up today's virtual community meeting, and miigwech to everyone for joining us. We hope it was helpful, and encourage you to reach out and contact our project team with any questions or comments that you may have. The project website is supplyroad.ca. Join us again soon for more project information. Miigwech, and see you soon.